Welcome to Shelf Candy. Today we're gonna paint some kind of weird devil man. So without further ado, let's get started. Oh yeah.
Shelf Candy. Shelf Candy.
Change that channel, you'll taste the blade!
For context, this part of the video would be boring if Chris didn't speed it up. No one wants to watch sanding, so while Chris does that, here's some fun facts you can use to impress your friends. In 1994, Dark Horse Comics released Hellboy: Seed of Destruction. It was created by American comic book artist and writer Mike Mignola. Oh, you're just gonna put a sanding montage in here anyway. Just riveting stuff. No, I'm sure people are just gonna love it. It's prime time. Chaos Black. There's literally hundreds of perfectly fine alternatives. Let's hit this with a zenithal highlight using a thinned down white. Zenithal priming is a method of pre-shading with two different colors to emulate shadows from a specific direction. The top surfaces will be highlighted, leaving the lower areas and recesses darker. The result is more realistic and three-dimensional. Or so I've been told. Hellboy's skin is red, so we want to almost completely cover those areas and really saturate the areas where light will be hitting. Hey, listen to this. I guess this thing's name is Anung Unrama, which translates to, "And upon his brow is set a crown of flame." Neat. According to Hellboy's creator Mike Mignola, the name was made up and doesn't have any actual meaning or background mythology, which is just great. Here we go again, with Chris's undignified way of masking with silly putty. Fine, I'll read it. The silly putty can be worked into tight areas and reused over and over again. You happy now? We're gonna mix and dilute a few colors here to add some tone and dimension to the shadowed areas. We will also use this color to add some volume to the muscle groups by painting it into the recesses. When diluting paints for your airbrush, only use thinner or water. See those purple spots on Chris's glove? It's not uncommon for him to do that to check his paint flow, but when it's this excessive, that's a telltale sign that he probably should have cleaned his airbrush better. And I, for one, am getting excited. As you can see, Chris's airbrush is clogged once again. Ugh. And right on the face. It's like I always say, if you do it right the first time, you never get to do it twice. Mistakes happen, and when they do, it's how you overreact and lash out at others that really matters. So Hellboy is native to a land known for its warm climate, so naturally he prefers to wear short-sleeved trousers to stay cool on those hot summer nights. These seem more tactical than leisure wear, what with all the excessive pouches and holster and whatnot, so Chris thinks base coating them brown is probably appropriate. That is just, well, that's a perfect shade of baby poop. There's nothing special about this step. You just want to make sure to get complete coverage. And while we have baby poop loaded up, we will go ahead and base his little open hoof sandals and holster too. Perfect. Now we're going to take some Cygor brown and hit a few of the areas we want to be a darker brown. Chris is being careful here because he wants to put a lighter contrast paint over the adjacent areas. Cygor brown is really dark and will show through any lighter contrast paint or wash. So just take your time. Or don't. All I can do is point out the turd on the sidewalk. I can't stop you from stepping in it. For the trousers, precision isn't that important. Chris just wants good coverage over the strappy belty parts. It's okay if it gets on the nearby areas. The plan is to come back later and paint those black. Though he is taking his time around the crotchular region, since that area will get a lighter wash. Dark oath flesh will now be used to add some tonal variation to Hellboy's accoutrements. Guys, listen to this. Did you know Hellboy was born with a normal right arm, but it was cut off when he was a baby, and the right hand of Doom was grafted onto him by his father, Azael? The hand originally belonged to Anum, a spiritual being created by God to watch over the earth. That is some crazy, crazy shit, right? The right hand of Doom is a key that can release and command the Ogdru Jahad, a destructive, seven-headed dragon imprisoned in deep space. I love it. Now let's release some of our very own Ogdru Jahad on this right hand of Doom. First, a gloss clear coat. Chris is using an acrylic clear, so it won't react with the next step. The next step is applying panel liner. The gloss finish facilitates the capillary action of the panel liner, helping it flow into and through the cracks. Precision is not important here, and this stuff is cheap. I think he paid $7 for it, and it'll last him the rest of his life. The only downside is the stupid applicator. It's part of the lid, and it's just awkward to hold. Magnificent. Since the top coat is acrylic, we can use a lacquer thinner to clean up our shame without damaging any of the work we did previously. Just dip a Q-tip in it and wipe off any unsightly areas on the surface. And that's it. The Doom hand is done. Well, it still needs a final matte coat, but the work that requires actual effort is done. Perfect. Now let's quickly wrap up Hellboy's sidearm before we move on to that base. First, Chris is going to push out some of that leather texture with a quick dry brush. Really wipe the paint off your brush before starting. You just want it to slowly build up on the high spots. A couple thin coats of the same brown will clean up the grip. For the metal parts of the gun itself, Chris took the creative risk of using gun metal. Bold choice. Exceptional. Time for the base. Chris is going to start with another dry brush pass. This base is a tad trickier than most. Chris has decided to start with the tentacles since they will require more effort and delicacy. We'll use a mucky green to paint the side of the tentacles without suction cups. This part is straightforward. It's a contrast paint, so the more you build it up, the darker it will get. So we will go light on the upward-facing surfaces and build it up deeper into shadowed areas. Now we're going to mix a few colors for the sucker side of these tentacles. Just be mindful of the areas we just painted green and angle your attack to avoid those or shield them with your hand. When mixing paint, Chris always mixes more than he needs, which is going to come in handy momentarily. Getting overspray on the stone surfaces is nothing to worry about. Chris assures me he has a plan for that. Now Chris is going to screw this part up by not diluting this magenta. He wanted this to be more of a wash, which it very clearly is not. For those of you following along at home, if you want to do this the right way, mix 1 part paint to 10 parts water. Remember how he mixed extra of the previous color? Chris is going to go back over this section once it's dry. And it's dry. Dry brushing really is fun. Feels like cheating, but it's not. Chris calls it a technique. Remember, the brush should be very dry. The last thing you want now is to have a bunch of brush streaks all over the part you just screwed up. Just be mindful of the green and smack all the edges. I wouldn't say Chris likes making mistakes, but he does like showing you that any mistake can be fixed. It's like I always say, anything is possible with enough time and money. Almost seems intentional now. That's much better. Now just a quick gloss coat to protect that work and make them look wet. Great. Now let's tackle the stone. Stone is stone, so Chris is going to start by using a dark gray, mostly to cover all the overspray from earlier. Complete coverage isn't necessary because stone has natural tonal variations that we can exploit for our evil purposes. Now, a liberal wash of Nuln oil to darken it even more. This will settle into the cracks and give us some free contrast. Keep an eye out for pooling and drips. Just wipe those with your brush and deposit it elsewhere. It'll be fine. Now let's pop those edges out. Since it's stone, Chris has selected sky gray for his highlights. A medium-sized dry brush is ideal here, so you don't accidentally get it on the tentacles. Just dry brush this on and really work it onto the edges and any raised details. Mission make it rock. Accomplished. We're on the home stretch. Let's wrap up the finer details on the Devilman's footwear. This is the part of the project where getting it done fast means going slow. Be delicate and don't overload your brush. Or, you know, give that a try. What's the worst that could happen? Finally, the hooves. I thought we'd never wrap these up. Irakui, Irakui, whatever. This color. Using the side of your brush on this step is the cheat code for these raised details. Now with this gray, Chris is gonna start to create that fade you sometimes see on demon feet. Trusty old gunmetal. Now these parts aren't actually guns, so let's settle down and just pretend that was called buckle metal. Ooh, careful. Careful now, Chris. Chris got a smidge of buckle metal on the leather and used a toothpick to scrape it away. That's a fun hack. You can use it. Time to wrap up the tactical vacation trousers. First, Chris needs to weather the battle harness of pouches and straps before moving on to the black short-sleeve chaps. Those are chaps, right? I mean, what else would they be? Chris is being careful to preserve the lighter brown edge at the bottom of the chaps. It will create a nice material break between those sun-kissed red legs and the chaps. Those are definitely chaps, right? Just let me know in the comments if those aren't chaps. Lots of buckles. Time to bust back out the buckle metal. Place your bets on how many times Chris will need to do some toothpick cleanup. Careful. Ooh, you risk-taking son of a bitch. Careful. Well, maybe we just witnessed some deceptive editing. Chris is gonna use an ear cleaning apparatus for the BPRD logo on the buckle. It's a highly advanced heretical technique that had him expelled from the Painters Guild. Now just a quick wash on the chap cuffs and the trousers are done. Perfect. This sword has some sort of frosting sculpted into it. Despite the sculptor's intent, Chris is gonna paint that as though it was flames. We are switching to inks here. They have a transparent quality that is well suited for things like fire. Start with lightly misting yellow, where the fire would naturally be the most intense. And as you move closer to the ends of the flames, feather in orange, then finally red at the tips. Just the tips. For the sword itself, Chris will naturally use, you guessed it, gun metal. Feather this up to the inks, being careful to keep some of the overspray on the sword. This is a cheap way to get some on-surface lighting. Now let's weather the crossguard and pommel with a little Nuln oil. And finally, let's paint the grip. And just like that, the sword is done. All that remains is Mr. Hellman's portrait. Now for the eyes, start with an off-white base like Dectan, unless you want to ruin your model trying to cover black with 40 layers of yellow. Chris does not have the steadiest hands, so he tends to rest as many fingers as he can on what he is painting and use short, controlled pulling motions while holding his breath. Now Chris is going to grab a tiny amount of diluted orange and surgically place it into the corners of the eyes. Don't be afraid to reorient your model so that you can pull your strokes in the way that gives you the most control. Now just a small dot of yellow where a pupil would naturally go. Nailed it. Almost done. Let's coat the demon antlers with a satin varnish to give them a slightly different luster than the rest of his body. Gloss would just be too showy for a dignified man of hell.
Bruh.
Final step. Chris is just gonna paint the hair with plain old black. No dry brushed highlights or anything. This is demon hair. It's presumably made of chaos and pure darkness. All right, guys, I think it's done. Behold.
Break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. This song is a warning. This shit is so messy, residence poison. And I am not legally responsible for your foolishness. You should probably wear gloves. Yeah. Chef Kenny, this is not cake.
All right, I'm gonna go now. Subscribe. Fuckers!
Yo, my boy Chef Candy is killing it with these paints, y'all.